It is Sunday, and it's LB0 Fox India Live today with the special guest over. I managed to point the right way today as well. Kjetil LB4FH, welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back here.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about DMR and how to set up a code plug from scratch. And for me, that's a little bit of a scary scenario because I haven't really done that much. Most of my code plugs are pre-made and just edited by me, but I figured I got to learn this somehow. And we're going to look at two different radios. I'm going to take the Retevis RT43, the radio I drove my car over yesterday, and program it. And you're going to look at the Anytone 878. Isn't that right, Kjetil?
Yep, that's correct. It's this one. Probably a lot of people have that already. I also have my GD77 here. It's the first DMR radio I had. Probably the first DMR radio many people had. It's like one of the first cheap ones on the market that were proper, but we're not going to play with that one today. But it's a nice.
And that can run that open GD77 software, can't it? The custom firmware.
Hopefully, it's a GD77. I just found out about that yesterday, so I haven't had time to look into it.
Yeah, I've been looking for a radio that can do that for a little while, but I don't want to pay too much for it. And
this one was a cheap one.
Yeah, exactly. But DMR radios are pretty much the same as programming wise. No matter what radio you have, you need to have, in addition to the frequencies, you need to have some contacts, whether that's talk groups or individual users. And you need to link everything together in a system, so it's easy to find the channels through zones and so on. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and you need a bit more information. You need to have something called color codes, which is basically a way of seeing different transmissions apart. You need to know which time slot you're on if you're working on a repeater, because those have two slots. One of them is usually like the main channels, and the other one is usually for ad hoc channels. So that's also important to know before you set up.
Yeah, so it takes a little bit more than setting up an analog radio, but it's still manageable even for hams like me to do it. At least I think so. I consider myself pretty computer savvy, so why don't we switch to the programming software for the Retevis radio first and take a look at it? And I've done some videos on the Retevis radio in case there are any new viewers here, so you can see what kind of radio that is. It's basically a simple commercial DMR radio with no screen and really no keypad. It's got a channel knob on top here, and that's pretty much it. But I think it supports two zones. So my plan is to do two zones here, one with my hotspot and one with the semi-local DMR repeater, and see how that works out. So let's see, we got the software up here. This looks simple, and as far as I can see, you have a basic segment here where you can enter. Well, we're not going to do anything about the serial, which is strangely enough 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have some settings here, and I think I got to scale this window a little bit so you can see everything. See if that's any better. Here you can enter your DMR ID. So let's start there. I'm going to enter my DMR ID. And in order to use a DMR radio, you need a DMR ID. And help me on here, Kjetil. That's radioid.com, or is it another website for that?
No, I know they changed a few years back. I don't really know where the first one is, but I do think it's radioid.net, which you can both look into the database and do other changes.
Yeah, and that's important though, because if you got a radio with a display, you can also download the database into your radio, so the user's call sign pops up when they transmit.
Yes.
So let's see here on my let's see here what I got to do. I got to change the language here, though. I don't want it in Chinese. I want it in English. I wanted to start up in zone 1, which is actually my... No, actually, yeah. And the thing is, when I'm sharing my window, the pop-ups doesn't show, so I can choose zone 1 or zone 2 here. I don't know what the relay retransmission is, so I'm going to leave that alone. And you can also set a password here. And my recommendation is don't do that, because at some point you're going to change the setup of the radio. And if you forgot your password, you're kind of not able to do that. So let's see if, and that's it for that menu. Then we have the keys. And on these kind of radios here, let's see if we can show this. You have function key 1 and function key 2. And I don't like to use the short press on those, because then you accidentally change something. So I'm going to use a long press on button 1 for high and low power. And for the second one, I'm going to do zone selection, so I can switch between the different zones. The next part here is, and just ask some questions in the chat. I'm going to try to look in the chat if possible. If not, Kjetil could answer the questions while I try to do some programming. So, and we got 2 zones here as far as you can see. I'm going to get back to those, but first of all, you got to enter some contexts. And let's see here. And the contexts are either talk groups or users. So I'm going to start with a group call because it's a talk group. And that's group 242, which is a Norwegian talk group here. And the ID for that is 242. Then I'm going to add another one. I'm just going to add a couple of talk groups here so you can kind of understand how it is. Next one's going to be a group call. And I'll put talk group 91 in there. It's not really a talk group that I like to follow, but it's a nice talk group to see if your radio is working.
Have you ever been on one of the nets they have on Fridays, I think?
The never-ending nets?
Yeah, the ones that last for like 3 or 4 hours or so.
Yeah, where everyone checks in. I've never been on them. I've heard them. And that leads to another problem with being on talk group 91. In order to disconnect from a talk group, there's got to be no activity in the talk group you're connected to. And so please do enter talk group 91 on your own risk. I'm going to add, let's see what else I can do. I can do the Toads talk group as my next talk group here. I'm just going to add 91 here. And the Toads talk group is I got a cheat sheet here, 3192083. And then I'm going to add a couple of more here just to be sure that we have everything we need. I'm going to add a disconnect talk group, which is talk group 4000. And I'm going to add a parrot so we can see if it works. And the Norwegian parrot is 242997, as far as I know. So then we got the context we need, and there are a lot of talk groups there. And I see Jeff Darby comments it's a good thing to put a parrot on it as well, and I've done that. And For this radio, we also need some receive lists. And let's see here. How many we got? 3 talk groups actually here. So in list 1, we can call that list 2. Put talk group 91.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what the parrot is, it's something you can talk to and hear back from again.
Exactly. So it's an easy way of checking if your radio and all of your settings works. Then you'll hear your own voice coming back to you a couple of seconds later. Just going to call this 91. And we're going to call this. And on these receive lists, I'm just putting one contact in each, but you can also actually put several so you can listen to different talk groups if the talk groups are active on the repeater or the hotspot at once. And you got an encryption tab here. We're not going to do that because that is not allowed on amateur radio. So now it's time to start setting up the zones. And I'm going to use zone 1 for my hotspot and zone 2 for the local repeater. I'm a little bit too far away from the repeater to reach it. And here you put in the frequency for your hotspot. My hotspot's simplex, so it's the same receive and transmit frequency, and it's a digital channel. And this is going to be talk group 242. On my hotspot, it has color code 1, and it's got slot 1. Everything on my hotspot is slot 1. We're going to see when we come to programming a repeater that's going to be a little bit different. You can see here it's got receive group 242, and it transmits on 242 here as well. And since it's a hotspot, we're going to change it to low power.
Yeah, we don't see that window.
No, that's a good point. You don't see that window. I actually don't know how I'm going to share that so you can see that. That was a good point. So I got a video out on how to program it, though. So I got to do some changing on my studio setup just to get this correct. But I can see that you can't see the window. Let me see if I can share just that window. Let's see what I can do here. Let's see if this is the correct one. Well, that's probably the correct one, but that won't show up. So, but you can do this in more detail when you do your radio here.
Yeah, I'll share the same one in my.
Yeah. Let's see. But I guess I've gone through some basics here, though. So I guess if you can show yours a little bit better, we can change to your screen and see if you're able to explain it better than I am. And for any new viewers, that's kind of the concept of this stream. It's venturing into things you don't really know a lot about and finding out how it works. And right now, what doesn't work is my screen setup for streaming.
Yep, I think you should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah.
Yes. I haven't wiped this completely, but I can do that. So I can just create a new file. All data will be reset. And in here, we will first go. This is for the ATD878, by the way. It's for this radio. And in here, the setup is a bit different. This is also very similar to the Radiodity, at least how I remember that software. So firstly, you have to go.
Yeah, and that Yeah, that radio is also known as the BTEC 6x2, I think.
Yeah, and I think also Voxun sells it and some others.
Yeah.
So in here, radio ID, this is my ID where I put in my, instead of my call sign. So I then put in a window view.
We actually have the same problem. We can't see that window either.
No, I know this is a window that only shows these two fields. I will show
okay. Sorry, it's the same window. Okay.
Yeah,
And
I will show
just
the simple ones or the more advanced ones later.
yeah, and just a word of caution there: use your own radio ID. Don't use ours because you need a corresponding password when connecting to the Brandmeister network, so it won't work for you.
Oh, it will, at least with this radio. So when you're sending in here, it was once like the default values for this one is starting at 1 million and going up. So I did send a package with DMR radio 1 million. That worked really fine. So yeah, please actually do fill this in correctly. Next one here, we have contact talk group. This is the same one as you showed earlier. So I can add a new one, and I will have to stop and start sharing a few times here.
That's fine.
I could, of course, share the entire screen to make this easier. Then I would have to hide you.
That's probably what I should have done, but I only have one screen active now, so that makes it a little bit harder. Can you see my screen now? Let's see. I'll add it right now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really wide, but we should be good.
Yeah. So in here, just double click and you can enter a name. For example, Norway, and say that's DMR ID 242. This is a group call. You can do a whole call.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the same thing as I was showing, except that when you do it, it shows up. So
yes. And for those who are new to DMR, maybe there's some of them in there. 242 is the prefix for Norway. So you can see my call sign or my caller ID is 242-3049. That's so everything in Norway starts with 242, and same for other countries. So 242 says it's Norway and the main talk group. And then you had the toads. Maybe you can read up that number for me.
Yeah, I can read that up for you. That's 319 20 2083.
Okay, and then it was, we can do the parrot, LA parrot.
Yeah, that's 242 997.
997. Okay. In here you can also, at least if it's a private call, set up some call alerts and some other ones. Not going to do anything of that here. And I'll just remove the first one. So this is my contact list. You can actually add it from the radio as well. It's really cumbersome, but you can do it. You can go in here, do some other options, like you have a prefabricated SMS, so you can predefine text messages. You have the receive group list, and this is like, what does the radio listen for? You can tell it to like ignore special call talk groups, and at least for the GD77, it wouldn't play any audio for you unless you had it in these receive lists.
Yeah, and that's the same with the Retevis radio as well. But by default, it puts all the talk groups into one receive list. So it doesn't matter which channel you're on. You can still receive from all the channels you have programmed, which took me a while to figure out.
Yeah. So in here, you actually have to add them. And you can filter out so that you, of course, then can limit who can hear you. So that's okay. Encryption here as well, we don't care about that. Contact lists is something you can download, and this will give you the name of the person on the screen and what city they are, what call sign they have. For American citizens, which state they're in, and so on. And there are quite a few I'm not sure if it's 100,000 yet, but there are lots of DMR contacts out there. So
As far
it's
as
a big file.
Yeah, as far as I saw, we've surpassed 100,000 because a lot of the earlier DMR radios had a limit of 100,000 contacts, and
Yeah.
you can't actually have all the contacts in the older DMR radios anymore.
Yeah, so you can often download for your country. There's places where you can do that on the net. So if we then go up here to the top here, you can go into channel. You can see this one has 2 channels programmed in already. And these are, of course, junk. They're outside of the bands. So we just delete them. And in here, we need to enter some information. And this is the window you couldn't see here earlier. I will set this up as a repeater. So my local repeater is LD4LI. And you can see that if you go into the Brandmeister network, this one, you can go to repeaters and then search for your repeater here. And you will then see here, it's a TX frequency and RX frequency. You can see which color code you have to use, and if there's a slot 1 or slot 2 or just 1 slot. So in here, the first thing it asks us for here is receive frequency and then transmit. And oops, that's the wrong one. TX for this one. This is, of course, opposite of what it should be. Very interesting fact with these ones is that they require you to fill in all the numbers. So you have to have 5 digits after the point. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
And, that radio does that when you enter from the keypad as well. It also requires all of the digits.
Yeah. So this one, in Norway on UHF, there's a 2 megahertz offset. If I don't remember wrong. Yeah. And there are a few different things here. You can put in some APIs, things, some scanning, and so on. I want to set up a digital channel. You can select the power, which is low. Low is half a watt, 1 watt, 5 watts, and 6 watts, I think. Bandwidth is an option for analog channels. You can set it so that you can't TX if the channel is blocked, and so on. You can add it to a scan list, which is like frequencies you scan. We then have to select the contact, press over here, and I would like to enter the toads in here. So just double click that. You can select which radio ID you have, which is again my number. This is color code 1. And here's the important part. In Norway, all repeaters are set up so that slot 1 is hard linked to certain groups. So if you go in here,
hard linked to only group 242, as far as I think, isn't that correct?
Nope, it's hard linked to 242 and the 242 and region. 4 is southwestern Norway. Yeah, and then you have time slot 2, which is hard linked to a local one, which is for that repeater, and for the county, I think it is. And any ad hoc group you put up will also be there. So if I were to open toads here, it would come up as a yellow one, which is a temporary one. You can also see activity here. There's a lot of activity on the repeater now, so I can't test it, sadly. And below here, you can see the coverage map for this repeater. So I live somewhere down here, and I actually do have good coverage indoors. But
yeah, and that coverage map actually says a lot about the topography, where it's open towards the sea and mountains on the east side there.
Yes. So if we go in here, we have to change this to slot 2. If you're running a hotspot like you're doing, you will almost always use slot 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You have a received group list, all. I think you can just add it in here as well. Of course, no digital encryption, no AES digital encryption. And the other settings here are mostly for analog frequencies. So basically now I can press OK, and this is the first contact setup, and then you can just copy, repeat, go down there. So I don't think we need to go through all of these. There's a few other interesting parts here. You can go into device information. This is just tells you something about the radio. Optional setting is a lot of different things. For example, which keys does what happens when you move around the radio. Does the GPS work or does it not work? And yeah, a lot of settings that's radio specific. And this radio isn't sold anymore, so I'm not going to go through it. There is an interesting part here which is called amateur mode. You're under work mode, and this took me a while to find out what it is. In amateur mode, you can program the radio via the keypad. If you put it into professional mode, you can make it send on any frequency. So you can do, for example, hunting radios or add other professional radios, but you can't program it via the keypad. So this one will bypass the protections for frequencies. And I do think a lot of the radios do that.
Yeah, most radios, in some way or another, you can usually open them for more than the amateur bands, and they might even be open like this one. I did a video last week or earlier this week, I'm not sure when, on just programming frequencies. This is sold as a UHF radio. But I programmed in some 2-meter frequencies, and it worked straight out of the box. So most radios can be modded.
Yeah, the chips inside them are mostly the same. So
yeah,
it's software defined. So, but you may have very varying conditions or results from that. So you could burn out the radio because of course the antenna doesn't match.
It is what I said in my video, though, that you do this on your own risk if you decide to do that. So, but for me, that's a little bit of what the hobby is about, just figuring out what the limits of your equipment is.
Yeah, absolutely. This radio has limited APRS, which is manual or analog APRS. And in here, you actually have to tell it to use the moving beacon, otherwise it will place you in China. So if you look at my APRS position, I have not been in China, but the radio sent it at one time. And APRS on Anytone is not a good option. It's basically, it does work at times, but it's not a good solution, and it's only TX for location.
Yeah, and that's what I've figured out with that radio as well. I've tried APRS on it a couple of times, and it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't work. And I haven't really figured out how to make it work every time.
Yeah. Last option here is GPS roaming. So you can actually make it change talk groups depending on where you live, or zones. So if you travel a lot, you can make it change that automatically. I've never tried it, but it apparently works quite well. So further down here, we have analog. And analogs, this an analog address book, I don't really know what you would need that for, but you can change the DTMF tones. So if you live a place where you have a very old repeater that still requires a 1750 tone to open, you can change things in here to make that work. So if we go to zones here again, channels, we can go in here and, for example, add 145,500.
And that's a simplex calling frequency in region 1, just to for North American listeners or viewers.
Yeah, or one of the most common one. So that's an analog one, and in here you can set pi whatever, and you can go in and set up the same settings as for the other for the DMR frequencies. So then we would have, whoops, digital, didn't switch, analog, there. So down here you can see you can add CTSS codes or DCS. So if you would need to do that, we do have a lot of repeaters in Norway that require you to use that, or prefer you to use it at least. So it's a very flexible radio that way.
Yeah. And now on to zones. I guess that's your next point here. How to use zones.
Yep, zones. That's somewhat of a misleading name. I think it's more flexible than being a zone, but it's a list of frequencies or channels. So basically, it's what you think you will hear from where you are. So I usually have one digital zone and one analog zone for the same area. That's my preference to do it that way. I also had one specific for Jamboree on the air. So a zone here, I can call this Stavanger, and you can go in here, add these two channels, and then you can go in here and see which is the A channel. And for those that haven't seen the radio, it has two channels, two slots, and these are just the default choices when you turn on the radio. And of course, you can go in here and order them if you have a lot of them, order by ID or name, or just move them randomly.
See if the camera picks this up properly, or if my colors are all off. But there are two VFOs here. Perhaps be better if, just hang on, if I do it like this. And I see some of the text is green screen green there, but you can somehow see what it looks like. So that's pretty much it. And I'll bring your screen up here again.
Yep. You can actually change a lot of that up here in the tool settings. You can go in and change colors. You can change the boot image. So if you would like to have your club image there, you can go in there and open some sort of bitmap file and write that to the radio. So it's you can do a lot of fun things there, also with the colors. So in here, I have Stavanger with two channels in the zone. In my previous one, I had a lot more of these zones. So if I would like to burn this to the radio, firstly, I'm not sure if you can focus on my camera.
Let's see if I can get just you up here. That was the wrong one. Like
Yep.
that.
So as with most of these Chinese radios, they use the Kenwood plug for programming. It's not the same as you would find for the GD77 or for any Baofeng radios. It's the same plug, but it's a it's a non-compatible device, which is typical for them. So I have 3 of these ones, and none of them work with each other. So just plug it in. It fits one way because you have one small and one thin. Could you go back to the screen again?
Yeah. Let's see.
Yep. So when I would like to write it now, I can just go in here. You have a few options. You can read from the radio. So if you've lost your information or wonder what's on the radio, you can do it here. Or you can do write to radio. Before that, we have to go into set and set com. And this is typical for all of these. They use old RS-232 to communicate over USB. So for those who don't know how to find the COM port, you go to the computer manager, device manager, and you can see a list here. And this is usually USB serial device.
Yeah, and if you can't find it, just unplug the cable and plug it back in, and you'll see which one disappears and comes back again.
Yep. So for me here, COM3, and then I'll just press write to radio, and asks me if I want to continue. Yep. And I would like to write other data. So if I have a contact list, a digital contact list, I can add that as well. But that can be a quite big upload. It can actually take a few minutes, so there's no need to do it if you don't want to change it.
And that's usually a thing you do once in a while when you need to update your contacts.
Yep. So now it's completed and the radio rebooted, and yeah, that's it. Should be ready to use. So maybe you can switch back to the camera here.
Yep. We're good.
Yep. Just waiting until it comes up. And for here, it's not a very nice setup. Oops. It's just shows one VFO at the moment. So you have to go in there.
Yeah.
So,
and it says what repeater and what zone you're on there, doesn't it, right now?
Yes, it is. And it tells me it's channel 1. It's DMR. It's not interested in focusing here, of course. And somebody tried to call. DJ encrypt off. Yes, it's supposed to be off.
7.
And let's see if I can reach you on Toadster and see what pops up, though, if you've got your radio ready.
Yes, I do.
LB4FH, this is LB0 Fox India.
Lima Bravo 0 Foxtrot India. Lima Bravo 4 Foxtrot.
Yeah, I think I read you.
Yeah, probably some feedback here.
This is hard to do. I'm just hang on.
The microphones do not like this.
Sorry for everyone on the Toads Talk group. We're just testing and streaming here. This is LB0 Fox India out.
Yep, and most of you could probably hear that there were some interference on Morten's signal at the moment. And it's the same with my monitor here. Actually, it flashes when I send DMR close to it. But that would be the same with any radio.
Yeah, and just one word of caution there. Just hang on. Be careful with your DMR radios close to your microphones. Let's see if we can switch to the group layout here. This is the microphone I used until my DMR stream. It does not work anymore. So be careful.
Yeah, it's a typical. For example, I do have a headlamp which I use for hiking, and it does not work together with APRS. So whenever an APRS package goes out, the radio or the light just shuts down. So, but I don't think there's anything much more to show here, unless you're going to do very radio specific things.
No, and for radio specific things, first of all, there are code plugs, and I guess the Anytone 878 is probably one of the easiest radio to find ready-made code plugs for, pretty much for every region in the world. But I was just going to show a website here. Just a word of caution, I am not sure if this is a legit website or not because I just Googled it, but let's see, over at dmrcontacts.com, you can download contact files. And not sure, as I said, not sure if this is legit or not.
Why is it?
I think. Sorry?
I have used it.
You've used it. I've used it myself as well. I was going to say that. So it's probably at least halfway legit, and that's an easy way of adding contacts. Let's see if we go back here. And Jeff says he can hear us in the US, and that's kind of the magic of DMR, though, because the repeaters and the hotspots are linked through the internet. So at least for those of you in countries with limited license classes, it gives you a feeling of reaching the world when you're not allowed to use HF and a lot of power.
Yeah. Before I got my DMR, I also used to do something called Echolink. And yeah, it's mostly the same. Like it's on a PC, but still you could talk to people from other repeaters, other places. So
Yeah.
that's the fun about it.
And you can also use Echolink on your phone, which makes it somewhat
Yep.
a little bit more usable.
But DMR has taken over here in Norway. We had a few that started with ISO Fusion. So there were a few repeaters with that. And that died out quite fast. I think there are still a few there.
There are Fusion repeaters, but not a lot of them are linked, though. Most of them are just standalone repeaters.
Yeah. And same with D-Star. We had a few of those. And like the problem was that they were proprietary. So
yeah, and as for Yaesu, we have a Yaesu repeater at our club, and to be able to link that, you need both a Windows PC and the Yaesu Wires X modem, which is a considerable investment. Although Yaesu is probably selling the repeater itself with loss, but all the extras to be able to link it is a substantial investment for club.
Yeah, and since if I could get my FT2DE or FT3 now, of course, with DMR, I would be really happy, because like it's a much better radio than any of the DMR radios I've seen.
Yeah, and even my Yaesu FT70D is a better radio-wise than my DMR radios, but that doesn't really matter as long as because you can't really have any QSOs on it, and that's kind of why we're into this, not only to have the best technology but be able to use it as well.
Yep, absolutely. So it's but it's fun. It's a good thing to have, and once you have it set up, like there's not very much to change. Maybe you'll add a talk group every now and then, but it basically works.
Yeah, I set up my Anytone. I set it up. I think it was 2 years ago, and I haven't really done any changes to it afterwards. And Jeff says here you can use a hotspot to get into DMR using YSF Fusion, and yeah, you can do that, and you can do it the other way around as well. But then it's the YSF rooms and not the Yaesu Wires X rooms, which add to the confusion, and digital voice modes are confusing.
Yeah.
And there's another digital voice mode, M83, I think it's called, which is open source, but there aren't really much radios for it and no repeater infrastructure, at least not yet. So one way of fixing a standard is bringing a new standard on the table, and that's what they've done with M83, even though it's an open standard, which none of the other standards actually are. It still doesn't matter if there aren't any users on it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I see Lionel says yet. That depends if it gains traction or not. And if you want to use your handheld to reach the world, you can also use All-Star. I've just looked into it. I've never tried it much, but that's one of the things I really want to look into through the winter. I don't know if you've got any experience with it, Kjetil.
No, I haven't. I've only used the DMR and IRLP, which is the Echolink protocol.
Yeah.
But
So
you will find some groups that are cross-linked, like
yeah.
But like that's against the terms of some of the services.
Exactly, and should you have a ham shack hotline phone, as some of us do, you can also reach some DMR talk groups using that. Not that I really want to recommend that. I've taken my phone down. It was about $15 worth of fun, and that was about it.
Yeah, I have considered setting up the hotspot here again, by the way. Because like earlier today, there was a lot of activity, 2 guys rag chewing, and that of course jams down the repeater. So
yeah.
So if you live in a place like this where there actually is a lot of traffic or a bit of traffic, then it's a good way to bypass it.
And that's a good point. And another point about having a hotspot is that you're flexible in what talk groups you want to have static. I always have the Toads talk group static on my hotspot, and I wouldn't be able to do that on a repeater.
Yeah.
There, it would disconnect after 10 minutes of inactivity.
Yeah, so I have the old MMDVM hotspot, which runs on the Raspberry Pi. On the UHF is the one I have set up here.
Yeah, I have one of those as well. And you can actually, since Raspberry Pis are so hard to get a hold of nowadays, there are MMDVM hotspots with USB out that lets you link it to a Windows computer as well.
Nice.
So I don't know if there are any questions in the chat. Feel free to come with them while we start to wrap things up here. And I hope you had some use of this impromptu how to set up DMR stream. It's one of those things where you got to do it yourself to kind of figure out the concepts, and you got to try and fail a little bit. But I hope this is a good start for some of you guys anyway. And thank you for Kjetil to join me here. And if you haven't, check out his YouTube channel. I'll try to remember to put a link to it down in the description. And if not, just search for LB4FH on YouTube. You deserve a lot of more subscribers there, Kjetil.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, and always fun to be on the streams and to see that there are some familiar names in the chat every now and then. It's great to have this kind of community around the ham radio hobby as well, like people that talk together and communicate in so many ways.
Yeah, and I see Jeff Darby comments that one of the joys of ham radio is the learning portion of it, and it definitely is. I usually set things up, get them to work, and learn how they function, and then I'm on to the next project. So that's ham radio for a lot of us. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I won't be back next week. Might be back the week after that, depending on my work schedule. But maybe I'll pop up with a stream on a different time, and keep a lookout for my videos and this guy's videos as well. 7-3.
7-3.